I'm Gene Joseph, been in Tucson since the very early 70s. Didn't start running till middle 70s, and then late 70s I was out training for a marathon and ran into Rick Kelly over on Mountain and Glen area. And we ran together, trained together, and then one day he said, you want to run a trail run? And I said, sure. And I don't remember the date. It was probably very late 70s, early 80s. And it turned out to be Bear Canyon. My first trail run was Bear Canyon. And it was with Rick Kelly and Paul Yates. And it was one of the fastest times I'd ever done and the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life until then. And it was 2:26, but I remember Paul saying, we're gonna go up Cardiac Hill, and I still not sure what he was referring to when he said Cardiac Hill, but the whole thing was hard to me. I thought I was on Cardiac Hill the whole time. I didn't start running with the TTR group though until probably the next season, and my first run with TTR was the Mount Lemmon ascent. But I loved Bear Canyon, the course, the time element, and so very quickly it became my regular weekend run to do when nothing else was happening. So in the early years, I don't remember how many runs a year I did. I've got it somewhere. But it wasn't too much later that I started averaging 20 to 24 bears a year, and mostly every Sunday. That was my day to run. And the distance was perfect, the timing was perfect. I could go out and do a Bear Canyon loop and then come back here and continue the rest of my day starting at 9 or 10 o'clock. It was great. And the course was just right for me. But as time went on, it developed that I wanted more distance, and Bear became a fallback run, but still to the tune of 20 to 24 a year for 15, 20 years in a row. And I used to run most of the runs with Bill Kukulik. And he's actually the one that got me started counting. I didn't keep accurate records then, although I kept truck records, so I could look at the truck records and relate how many times I'd gone to Bear Canyon, because I kept track of business versus personal miles. Anyway, after many years of that, I was up running 50 miles and started to gear up for a 100-mile run. And more than once, twice I think I did this, I ran a week of bears. Every day I'd get up and go run Bear Canyon. And those were my I was never a huge mileage runner. Those were my longest weeks. What was it, 119 miles or something like that for the week, which was pretty good for me, but at the time there were numbers double that easily, people doing double that distance. And I was never a hugely competitive runner. Even on Bear, my times reflect staying ahead of the people behind me and not being able to catch the people in front of me. I always liked to run alone. I didn't like to talk on a run. So I found that in-between spot, but I never trained for speed. I always trained just to have a good run. And if I could do that, it was a great run for me. But as it turned out, I was hugely consistent over time. Until, as I aged, things started happening, life happens. But the 2 weeks that I ran every day for a week were just, and they were separate, they were 2 different years. They were just incredible weeks to me. And I loved being out there. And one of the things I think about Bear, if you're trying to run a really fast time, you need to pay attention to the surface. And those weeks, day after day, I could tell you which rocks I was stepping on. And I think that is even more important now, so that you're not breaking stride. Several of the places, the creek crossings used to be a breeze. We would just bound across these, I don't remember, 18-inch by 18-inch pads. There could be a foot of water in the creek and we'd be across and bone dry. Now you have to, there's none of that. You have to pick and choose. And there's a couple other sections where you have to do things like that aren't over the creeks. One of them being on the trail just coming down just before the road. Several sections in that area in any case. It's real rocky, and I'm sure younger, stronger legs than mine can negotiate it easier, but I think it's worth thinking about and planning some of those, planning your approach, planning which rock you're going to hit and how you're going to finish those things. So when was it? October 14th. Late October 2014 is when I did my 500th bear, and that was a big thing for me. I didn't know how big until I did it, and I've done a few since then, but shortly after that, 6 months after that, I had a hip replaced, and I've done several bears since then. I'm not likely to ever be back at the quantities, the numbers that I used to do before, but I still love the course. My wife got into it. She never ran it. However, she's hiked it more than 25 times. And we share stories about the place. One of my favorite places used to be, still is a good place, used to be though, the basin, the creek crossing at the basin. You guys probably never saw that when in the old days, when it was just a meandering creek 10 or 12 feet across of rocks with water in the middle. And then in 1993, January or February, we had a huge flood, and that whole creek bed got washed out. It's now 100 feet or more across. The big juniper tree that used to be in the middle, the sycamore trees, are long gone. And that was a big hit. Everything was white, upturned rock. And that was one of the major changes in the canyon that I saw. The other changes, I guess an earlier change, a later change, was the '03 fire. And we were actually excluded from the canyon for almost a year. That bummed me out because I wanted to see the changes as our trail came back. And then the flood of '06 was probably the biggest thing to ever happen up there. The debris flows that we now see never existed on that mountain range. There are now over 240 of them, named and numbered. And the people that study those things never were able to study one locally. Now they have 240 plus to go out and study. And that was big. That was a lot of water coming down. And that same year, the creek, the road itself got totally obliterated. And the Forest Service has a policy of not being able to close something officially until they generate a letter. I knew that letter was coming on Monday, so I went up before that letter came out on Sunday and had my mind blown. I thought they'd never open the road again. There were rocks half the size of my house in the road, and I thought they'd just make a trail through and around all that stuff. There was little pavement left in sections. It was just incredible. But lo and behold, money and big equipment can make things happen, and it did. And then most recently we have the fire, and I don't think anybody's been on bear that I know since the fire. and I'd love to get out there and see it again, and I will.